Gentlemen, you can't fight the hair loss without going for a hair transplant. 2 weeks ago, I did make a video of Zap Sanders on his treatment and possible underlying problems, what was holding him back from reaching full potential or full stock hair. And in today's video, I want to dive deeper into it and talk about his hair transplant or hair transplant in general, and also specific things in his treatment that I think could also be a reason why he was not able to reach the full potential of hair recovery. And for you guys who are new to the channel, my name is Alex, and I'm previously hair loss sufferer who is able to regrow back my own hair. And I'm also a certified trichologist, and I was dealing with my hair loss in my early 20s for almost a decade before I was able to solve my hair loss. And since then I have been able to help thousands of guys to do the same, either by my YouTube channel or my program to work with them directly. And if you are having hair loss or the treatment is not working, book a session right now below this video. There is a link for it. Let's speak and solve your problem once and for all. So when it comes to the hair transplants, hair transplants is an invasive method to address the hair loss. It is not simple procedure. It is full of the risks. The hair can be weakened, at least in the short term, and there can be shed because of it. So hair transplant is not safest way to address this hair loss. And when one does a hair transplant, there is no way back. Right, so basically one do a hair transplant and there is no way to reverse it, right, if there is something that goes wrong. So this is important to remember and keep in mind. Additionally, hair transplant is not going to solve hair loss, it's not going to stop the hair loss progression. Right, this is also important. And often one kind of assumes that it is something that just relates to existing hairs, that the transplanted hair will stay, but the existing hair can't thin out. But also transplanted hair can continue to thin out. For example, if there are underlying problems, let's say for example there are underlying problems that affects bacteria, for example, such as gut issues or immune problems, then those transplanted hair will also shed out when they are transplanted to the frontal area. Or for example, if there is scalp problems such as dermatitis or inflammation, then it is still something that can weaken those transplanted hair and makes them fall out. And I have worked with many guys who have had a dermatitis or scalp inflammatory problems. They did a hair transplant and it was not successful, and they start to lose existing hair, but also additionally transplanted hair as well. So this is a risk that one has to keep in mind as well. So here's an important point is that transplanted hair or transplant itself is not going to solve underlying problems. This is important to remember as well. And additionally, a lot of guys who do a hair transplant, they are not happy with density they are able to achieve with transplanted hair, and they often end up using hair fibers or hair concealers, which, like I've spoken about before, is not something I would put to my scalp. And remember back in 2011 when I actually did use a hair fiber for a couple of months, it just irritated my scalp and caused having more irritation and more shedding afterwards. So those are my main concerns about transplant itself. And additionally for transplant is that one usually ends up using a treatment even when one has done a hair transplant, right? So basically if one, for example, is having androgenic alopecia, do a hair transplant, one still continues to use finasteride, for example, one likely continues to apply minoxidil. And interesting thing here is that if one hasn't been able to get results from those treatments before the transplant, how can one expect getting results from it after transplant, right? Because transplant doesn't address those underlying problems. So this is kind of a missing link I often see one overlooks, because one doesn't address the underlying problems why the treatment was not working in the first place, right? So basically what happens is one does a hair transplant, invest in it, and use basically a lot of efforts to get the hair back with the hair transplant, but then it doesn't work, and the treatment itself also doesn't work because even before it didn't work, and afterwards the transplanted hair still can continue to fall out. So this is also an important factor to remember. And when it comes to topical gel or finasteride that he was using, it is not necessarily best solution for everyone. In my case, for example, and what I recommend for the guys in my program is to work on DHT sensitivity, block DHT, but also work on DHT sensitivity. Because often what happens is that if one is very sensitive internally to DHT itself, then topical application of DHT blocker is not sufficient to address the shed high DHT sensitivity. Then just gel, for example, can be not sufficient to apply on the scalp to address the DHT angle. And that could be possibly also a reason why he hadn't been that successful with full recovery of the hair. And thing with finasteride, if one is concerned about finasteride side effects, there are many ways one can address this angle, right? One, for example, microdose it. Microdosing is often a way to work around it. Natural DHT blockers is also the way to work around it. Like, it's not as effective, but it is something that can work, especially in combination with topical DHT blocker, like if one is using, for example, topical finasteride or topical dutasteride. And additionally, he's also applying a couple times a week rosemary oil with carrier oil. And the carrier oil for rosemary oil he uses is either castor oil or pumpkin seed oil. And I remember myself when I was using pumpkin seed oil a couple of times. So what happened is that it would lead to more shedding for me. Right, so basically my scalp didn't like pumpkin seed oil, and even if it is a DHT blocker, my scalp still was reacting to it. So this is something to keep in mind, that you have to be mindful about what kind of carrier oil you're actually using if you decide this kind of natural approach. And additionally, mixing together treatment that is natural and pharmaceuticals, such as minoxidil, is often not necessary. From my experience, if one is having a problem of follicles that are inactive for a long time, rosemary oil is not going to have a huge impact to this kind of situation, right? So minoxidil itself is much more potent way to do it, and combining treatments, doing too many things to treatments, it can affect the follicle health and also cause setbacks and, for example, more shedding. He's also using rosemary water on his scalp that he sprays in the shower, and that can be fine, but the problem with rosemary water, if it is something that is pre-made, let's say 2-3 weeks in advance, it is something that can have a more bacteria growth in it, right? Like likely rosemary oil can help a bit to reduce that bacteria growth in that water, but still it is a risk factor. So I wouldn't make or pre-make rosemary water 2 to 3 weeks before I would use it. Right, this is just a side note here as well. Additionally, he spoke about he's doing scalp massage for 5 to 10 minutes a day, and he spoke about that he feels the scalp sometimes feels tight. So pointed directions, there is some scalp problems, right? There could be, for example, some microinflammatory problems in the scalp that is not fully addressed, that is holding him back from reaching full potential. When it comes to the shampoos, Zap is using 2 different shampoos that he alternates between. He's using Redundant shampoo, and then he is using also DHT blocker shampoo from Zion, from the same brand that is making the finasteride gels that he's applying. And both of those shampoos, especially Zion DHT blocking shampoo, has a lot of chemicals in it that I personally wouldn't apply on my scalp. I'm sure those factors is something that is holding him back and making that he hadn't been able to reach full potential hair recovery. I want to mention that Zap Sandash is also taking creatine for gym performance. And I have spoken before in my previous videos that I do have more shedding if I take creatine, and it even happens if I take finasteride. So for me, creatine does affect my hair shedding, and that's the reason why I don't take it. So it could possibly be a reason why Zap Sandash either has those kind of hair shedding cycles that he's experiencing from time to time, that he has spoken about before, or he hasn't been able to reach the full potential, because creatine may affect shedding for some, like not for everyone. I have spoken with plenty of guys who have no issues with creatine at all, but I personally have issues with creatine, and some guys who reach out to me or have been in my programs, they also have experienced higher shed when they have been taking creatine. So this is something I wanted to mention for you as well, guys, that you need to be aware of, that there are factors that can affect the hair shed, affect the hair growth, even if you are doing everything correctly in terms of treatment, in terms of the approach you are doing. My conclusion here is that if Zap did address the underlying problems he was having and addressed his treatment and flaws in the treatment itself, he would have been able to get better results, possibly full set of hair, and possibly avoid the hair transplant. And if you are in a similar situation, if you are doing treatment, you're not seeing results, or treatment is not working, or you are still shedding hair, book a session below this video. Let's speak, let's find out what is holding you back and do something about it. And if you are not able to book a session, you can always get a hold of Rapid Regrow Formal Workbook, which has all the steps you need to regrow your hair. Thanks for watching this video, guys, and see you next time.